Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Daisy Cousins Show. I'm Daisy Cousins, and I am thrilled to be here on ADH TV 3 times a week, and we have a fabulous show for you tonight. Joining me this evening are counsellor for Mackay and commentator extraordinaire George Christensen to talk about the very strange decision of Coles and other manufacturers of slipping an additive into their cattle's food that, if consumed by humans by proxy, can cause male infertility. And we will also speak to President of the Australian Jewish Association, David Adler, about the shameful decision by the Albanese government to switch their vote in the UN to support Palestinian statehood and to demand Israel's withdrawal from what they're calling the occupied territories. But first, we've all heard over the last few years about the fate of big businesses who buy into the woke agenda. Some big company decides it's a great idea to inject a bit of left-wing social activism into their advertising campaign, products, spokespeople, etc. It results in a huge public backlash, and ultimately customers are lost and profits go down. Now, arguably, the two most famous examples of this recently are Gillette razors, who lost billions of dollars after mounting this Me Too-inspired ad in 2019.
Bullying.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Masculinity.
Is this the best a man can get? Is it?
It's likely happening here in bullying as well. A problem.
We can't hide from it.
Sexual harassment is taking over.
It's been going on far too long. We can't laugh it off.
Who's the daddy?
What I actually think she's trying to say.
Making the same old excuses.
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
And iconic beer brand Bud Light, which hired woke trans activist Dylan Mulvaney to do a social media collaboration last year.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us. So, I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. And I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way, it's a cause to celebrate. This month, I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too. Love ya! Cheers! Go team! Whatever team you love, I love too. Okay. Love ya. Okay, break a leg.
The nosedive that Bud Light as a brand and a product faced after that was truly the stuff of nightmares. So obviously it is in the best interest of big business to stay out of politics and concentrate on serving customers. Duh. But here's the thing. The principle applies to small business as well, which, in the wake of the 2024 US election, one small business owner, a hairdresser in the state of Idaho, appears to have not realized. 40-year-old Tiffany Prickett, who runs the Voyage Beauty Salon in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, has gone viral after posting this rather unfortunate message on social media last month.
If you voted for a monster, you are okay with racism, and you are okay with homophobia, and you are okay with sexually assaulting women and children, by the way. So, if you are okay with those things, you are those things. Point blank, period. So if the shoe fucking fits, wear it with your whole fucking foot, Cinderella.
So clearly, poor Tiffany here is suffering from late-stage Trump derangement syndrome. She has evidently bought into every lie she's ever heard from the mainstream media and lefty corners of the internet, which is most of the internet. Hence this rather virulent reaction toward Trump supporters because she didn't get the election results she wanted. Now that in theory is all fine. She is entitled to her opinion. She is entitled to be, wrong. The problem is she runs a business, and that business is in Idaho, a state in which 66.9% of the population voted for Donald Trump. It is one of the most conservative states in America. So Tiffany should have been able to reasonably assume, one would have thought, that at least a few of her hairdressing clients were Trump supporters. Nevertheless, she felt moved to post these videos to social media. However, soon afterwards, reality found her.
So this is me suffering the consequences of my own actions. I just had a client send her husband into my salon and demand a refund for gift cards pre-purchased because of my stance that if you support a racist, homophobic, misogynist rapist, and you're okay with those things because you supported them, that you are in fact those things. And she was so offended by that she said that she did not feel comfortable coming to my salon anymore.
So this woman, Tiffany goes on to say, had been a client of hers for 15 years. So you can imagine how annoyed she was when she saw Tiffany's post on social media, and it's no wonder she wanted to go to a different salon. However, Tiffany didn't seem terribly upset that a 15-year-long client who'd been very good to her was so offended she didn't want to come to her salon anymore, and in fact doubled down on this sentiment later in her video.
If I lose a client because I stand up for human rights and you are offended, which by the way, if you're offended that I said that, you might want to do some inner work, because the racism and the homophobia and the misogyny in this country is so deeply ingrained in your subconscious that you are unwilling to understand anything, then I can't understand it for you. So if you want to not be my client anymore because I stand up for human rights, like I said in my video, if the shoe fucking fits, wear it with your whole foot, Cinderella.
Now, aside from the fact the whole I'm standing up for human rights shtick is redundant because Donald Trump isn't actually coming for anyone's human rights, Tiffany made the mistake that big businesses have made before her. She's doubled down on her public social activism that does nothing to serve customers. As a result of her doubling down, this happened.
They're dropping like flies. I lost one of my clients today who clearly was a Trump supporter. And they sent me a message. They never cancel their appointment. They don't have the courage to cancel their appointment, and it's just fucking rude. But anyway, she messaged me after I had messaged her, like, hey, I had you down at 3, just making sure you're on your way. I'm making sure you're okay. And she wrote back, Dear Tiffany, spelled my name wrong. I am so sorry that this last election has upset you so much as to elicit the hateful public post you made on TikTok. Not once, but twice. I have really thought highly about you, and your posts have broken my heart. Since you have made it clear how you feel about anyone who doesn't share your opinion, I feel you have left no opinion but for me to move on. I wish you the best, and I am terribly sorry.
Despite this rather heartfelt message, yet again, Tiffany doubled down with the same half-baked, ignorant rhetoric about Trump supporters.
But I would rather go and do what I need to do and work at Chipotle after my 22-year career in this industry and refuse to let people feel comfortable in my space to support racism, homophobia, and misogyny and a rapist. I would rather go work there than have people feel comfortable in my space with that and that mentality. So, again, I'm reaping what I sow. I am suffering the consequences of my own actions, but I stand by what I said.
Now, I really do wish this person well. It is clear Tiffany is simply so entrenched in the lefty bubble that nobody has ever provided her with the other side of the story, so to speak. And it's very hard to form a nuanced opinion on something when you've only ever heard one version of events. But the moral of the story, both for businesses and for individuals, is clear. For businesses, don't publicly declare a political leaning of any kind because you will alienate a large chunk of your client base. That is just obvious. And for individuals, don't assume that everybody you know shares your political opinions. You may be very surprised as to just how many people you know disagree with you, but don't want to say anything because they don't think it's worth the argument. And the sooner we can all hark back to the days when you could have a hearty political discussion with people who disagreed with you, not take it personally, and then all go out to dinner afterwards, the better. Welcome back to the Daisy Cousins Show. Well, there's a bit of a scandal in the area of meat this week after it's revealed that supermarket giant Coles and another of other companies have been feeding their beef and their cattle an additive called Bovaer, which is supposed to reduce the cattle's greenhouse gases. By, of course, we mean methane, by which Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would call farting cows. The problem there, however, is that this additive is known to negatively affect male fertility in humans. And yet the companies are still pushing this supposedly green additive. It's all very, very strange, and we're so lucky to have with us this evening to discuss all of that and more, Councillor for Mackay and commentator extraordinaire George Christensen. George, it is so fabulous to have you on the program again. So, as I mentioned, this additive negatively affecting male fertility, how is Coles allowed to do this?
Well, it's a wonder how any outfit is allowed to put this into the food supply. And it's obviously being ingested. The whole thing is one of those green schemes where we're going to stop cows farting to save the planet. But and I'm going to have to refer to my notes because I can't read this chemical name off the top of my head, but it's called 3-nitrooxypropanol, or 3-NOP for short. Now, this is the key ingredient within this Bovaer product that's been used to basically suppress cow farts and lower the methane and the climate change causing gases that apparently come out. But what they've found in the studies that have been done is that it might damage the DNA, so it's got genotoxicity of the animals that ingest it. It causes abnormal cell growth, in other words, cancer, in lab animals at high doses, and that's been shown in rats. And what's also been shown in rats that they've tested it on is that there's male reproductive toxicity. So there's a lot of concerns here, and what is key is that the companies that have embraced it, Coles, as you mentioned, also Adler, one of the biggest dairy companies in Europe, they are all saying, it's like all this misinformation out there about how this could potentially be harmful. But the one thing is, study after study has actually said that there's little understanding of the long-term human safety when you're consuming meat or dairy products that come from cows that have ingested 3-NOP. And, that says it all. I mean, where have we heard this story before, Daisy? It's all safe and effective. Don't worry about it. And yet, in terms of long-term data and long-term studies on the impacts of ingesting this meat, ingesting these dairy products for humans, is just simply not known.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary, and it sounds to me like it's also cruel to the animals if it's causing abnormal cell growth, and who knows what to make. Yes, it probably makes their tummies feel awful as well, trying to stop them farting.
It changes the digestive system in a way that is not very good. It actually changes the chemical, makeup inside the cow's stomach, and so there is issues of whether this is actually cruel to the animal, unnatural to the animal, and what the long-term impacts on cattle are going to be. But, the big food sector just does not seem to care. They don't care about the impacts on animals, and they don't care about the impacts on human beings. So this should be suspended immediately. And I'd say I'm one who loves buying my steaks from Coles. I won't be buying steaks from Coles again.
Yeah, fair enough, and neither will I. It's just an absolutely crazy, psychopathic thing to do, to put this additive in. Now, look, George, the Australian dollar is crashing at the moment compared to the US dollar, which is unfortunate for us, but somehow the elites have turned this into a way of bagging out Donald Trump. George, what is the real story here?
Well, of course, everything is Donald Trump's fault, Daisy. And, the Aussie dollar crashing is apparently his fault. And why is it his fault? Because they're saying he's going to be entering a trade war again with China. Well, this has been coming for a long time. It's not as if Donald Trump wasn't a proposal for president. We've known that he's likely going to be president for well over a year. And he's running on a platform of putting America first. And that means ensuring that Americans benefit from any trade deals that they are actually engaged in. The problem here is actually not Donald Trump. The problem about a crashing Aussie dollar, which the Bank of America is actually saying could drop, I think, as low as 55 US cents. Sorry, the other way around. We'll be the ones on the receiving end of that. But it's going to be low, and as a result, there's going to be high prices. I mean, we're already experiencing inflation. There's going to be increased inflation. It'll affect every Australian, particularly at the fuel bowser. Watch those fuel prices rise over Christmas and into the new year. This is going to be catastrophic at a time when, the economists are now saying we've entered into the longest period of recession that we've actually had in Australia. So there's been no significant wage growth, and household spending has contracted. No wonder. Now this is going to happen. Now who's at fault? It's not Donald Trump, because he's not. He hasn't done anything to the Australian economy. The fault is the Australian government of both persuasions. Now, of course, there's exposés out there at the moment on the climate change scam. I mean, climate change plans and the pursuit of renewables, which really should be called unreliables, is hampering this country. It certainly hurts the growth of manufacturing. It stagnates manufacturing. And, we've had plans that have been put forward to governments of both persuasions in this country, notably by Senator Matt Canavan, for how that we could get manufacturing back online in Australia. And those plans have just simply been ignored. We've had plans put in place that I actually drove in the last Parliament on trying to pivot away from China. And those plans have been ignored. So if there's someone to blame, it's not Donald Trump. It is the Australian government, and I've got to tell you, people are going to be hurting in the new year because of this. They're going to be hurting quite a lot.
Yes, absolutely. It's certainly very bad news for Australians with this news, and also very bad news for Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers. They are certainly not going to be very, very happy at the moment. Now, look, George, I have to get your take on this. You've been very outspoken about it. Australia's social media ban for under 16s has passed the House and the Senate, which means it will be made law. Now, while, look, it does sound good in theory, since, social media is harmful to kids and they probably shouldn't be on it, but you've argued there is a sinister ulterior motive to this ban, isn't there?
Well, the sinister aspect of it is the fact that every Australian's now going to have to show some form of identification, some form of proof that they're an adult. And, apparently the most innocent one is biometric scanning. Well, I don't want Facebook or whatever to be doing biometric scans of my retina or face. I mean, what are they going to do with that data? How confident are we that they're just going to simply delete it? Or is there going to be something stuck in the fine print now from Meta and other outfits saying that we're going to retain that and we're going to on-sell it? So, this is causing actually big tech to become more privacy invasive, as if they weren't enough privacy invasive enough. Now government's forcing them to do more, and the biggest problem is that it's got the potential to de-anonymise the internet. Now, if you are a whistleblower, and this is where the big concerns come in, if you're a whistleblower, if you're someone that's exposing something and you're wanting to do it anonymously, how quickly are law enforcement agencies going to be able to manoeuvre to actually expose who you are because of this, privacy that's now being invaded by big tech at the behest of government? I think that it's all shades of wrong. Yes, I don't want my daughter on social media as well, but this is just simply not the answer.
Yeah, I think really it's a cliche, but the devil is really very much in the detail in this. I really, in principle, support the ban. Social media is terrible for kids, but I don't see how this is going to be implemented in a way that is, one, going to value people's privacy, or two, going to actually be logistically possible. Given how clever kids are with the internet, no doubt they will find a way around the ban. So we'll have to wait with bated breath and see, I think, what happens with this. Now, look, Georgia, just before we go, very keen to get your take on this as well. US President, as we're told he's president, Joe Biden has pardoned his erstwhile son, Hunter Biden. Oof, now look, I think this is good news for Donald Trump, isn't it? I mean, Trump can now pardon anyone he wants, including presumably himself, and the Democrats can't bat an eyelid, can they?
Well, heaven help them if they do, because, he said he wouldn't do it. Biden said he wouldn't pardon his son, has pardoned his son. Look, I mean, as a father, I can probably forgive him as well. If I had that power to do that, I probably would do it. I mean, that's human frailty.
Yeah.
But the fact is, where has been the mainstream media outrage from the US about this? It's been covered, sure, but imagine if it was Donald Trump who did it. There'd be impeachment calls already. You would have all the talking heads on MSNBC, CNN, and all the rest of it saying he needs to be removed from office. So, spare us, please, mainstream media and Democrats, when Donald Trump goes and pardons Julian Assange or Edward Snowden or people that actually probably deserved a pardon rather than Hunter Biden.
I know. Heaven help them indeed is going to be incredibly, incredibly entertaining to watch. George Christensen, a delight, a privilege and a pleasure as always to have you on the show. All the very, very best and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. We will see you in 2025.
Merry Christmas to you and all your viewers, Daisy. Thank you very much.
You're watching The Daisy Cousins Show. Well, it is bad news for the Jewish community in Australia this week when, in a scandalous move, Anthony Albanese's Labor government has switched its vote in the United Nations to support Palestinian statehood and demand Israel's withdrawal from what is known as, quote-unquote, the occupied territories. This is a completely grotesque move and should outrage anyone who is reasonably minded. And fortunately, we have here tonight to talk about all of this and more is President of the Australian Jewish Association, Dr. David Adler. David, it is so good to have you on the program. I'm so glad you could come on to talk about this. I hate this move by the Albanese government. Tell me, how is it affecting the Jewish community in Australia?
Daisy, we hate it as well. We didn't expect that we would have an Australian government, even a Labor government, that would turn against our only real ally in the Middle East, Israel, and dump the Jewish community in Australia. It's been absolutely dreadful. Anybody with a modicum knowledge of history would know that the Jewish people have thousands of years of history in the land of Israel, well before Islam existed, even before Christianity existed. And this ridiculous term, occupied territories, includes areas like Judea and Samaria, the biblical heartlands for the Jewish people. It includes the old city of Jerusalem and even the Jewish quarter and the Western Wall. This is what Penny Wong has directed Australia to vote against, to say no, and to reward the terrorism which we've seen, some of the worst terrorism in modern history. And it's going to have dreadful implications for Australia, both domestically and internationally, in our view.
No, absolutely. And aside from the fact that, as you say, it is rewarding terrorists for their very bad behaviour, to say the least, Palestine, that whole area, it can't really even qualify as a state. I mean, in order to be a successful nation state, you have to at least have a functioning government, for one thing. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you also need to have a functioning economy, of neither of which they actually have. So why is Australia doing this if the place they wanted to be a state can't even actually qualify as a state?
Judge, it's worth making the observation they don't want a state. Neither the Jews nor the Arabs want a state, for quite different reasons. The Jews don't want it because they don't want to create a new giant Gaza, which would be a terrorist hub, because we know that all the polls show that Hamas and other radical Islamist organisations are the most popular and would get elected should there be an election. The Arab Palestinians, on the other hand, don't want a state because they don't want to live alongside a Jewish state called Israel. What they want is Israel eliminated. So the only reason we can think that this is happening is because, as you know, we have a federal election within about 6 months, maybe a little less. Yeah. And there are some seats in southwestern Sydney and elsewhere which are held by Labor and are being challenged either by this new Muslim vote movement. We don't think that'll be very successful, but the Greens have gone for some of these seats through their radical positions, and perhaps Labor is trying to chase the Greens more leftwards to more radical positions in order to shore up the Muslim vote, frankly, in some of these seats. We think it's being driven by grubby domestic politics rather than what is correct or what is in Australia's national interest.
Yes, that would certainly be my guess. It just smacks of politics here. And, you know, as you say, I don't know how strong the Muslim vote movement is going to be either. I don't think they have the numbers here, but still the government is indulging in this. It's just appalling. And not only that, this is going to drive us even further away, not only from Israel, obviously, but also from the USA, with the incoming Donald Trump administration fiercely pro-Israel. Now, getting the Americans offside is surely the last thing Australia should be doing. So what is the Australian government thinking?
Well, two things worth observing here. First is that even the Biden-Harris administration, which is actually not known as a right-wing reactivist government, they didn't go down this path. They voted against the recognition of a pseudo-Palestinian state. So Australia has taken a much more radical reactionary position than the Americans. But the Trump administration and many of the people that he's bringing in are very principled on these issues. They know about security. They know about combating terrorism. Some of them are actually quite learned in foreign policy. And we think that the Trump administration will take a much more positive view. And don't forget that under Trump previously, there were no Middle East wars. And in fact, the opposite occurred, something called the Abraham Accords, when there were breakthrough agreements to normalise relationships involving a number of the Arab Muslim countries and Israel, led by Israel on the one hand and the UAE on the other. And hopefully we can actually see that there can be some further peace building. The majority of Arab countries do not want to go down the radical terrorist pathways that some do, the Iran-driven movement, if you like. And hopefully we can bring Saudi Arabia and a few others into the peace building as well, and that would be tremendous. So perhaps January 20 will be a bit of a pivot and Australia will be left behind. And a couple of American spokespersons for the Trump side have said that, they can't trust a foreign government that undermines their efforts. And Australia would currently be seen as undermining the foreign policy efforts of the United States.
Yes, certainly. It's just a mess. And as you say, that we had a lot more peace in the Middle East under Donald Trump. So hopefully I agree that January 20th, Inauguration Day for Trump, will be a bit of a turning point for the war. Let's hope so. And look, meanwhile, David, there was a pro-Palestine protest that took place in Sydney last night outside Sydney's oldest synagogue. I mean, gosh, this pro-Palestine crew, they really know how to pick the locations that will cause the maximum amount of distress to the Jewish community, don't they?
Yeah, there was an event at the synagogue last night. The event focused on a high-tech tertiary establishment in Israel called Technion. Technion is world-rated. It's got a number of Nobel laureates amongst its alumni. It is the place that did innovation for some of the Intel computer chips. And interestingly, Daisy, a significant cohort of the students there are Arabs. These people should be celebrating, not opposing the innovation that's happening, because Technion provides a world-class education to many Arabs so that they can improve themselves. But to do this protest outside a synagogue, for a while it was locked down. The Jewish people in that synagogue, under police direction, were not allowed to exit once the function had finished for fear for their safety on the streets of Sydney. That's the world we live in. We're hoping that there is a majority of reasonable Australians that have frankly had enough of this, that are not extremist anti-Semites, that are not haters of Israel, whatever your view of the Middle East politics is, and I guess most Aussies, it's not their bread and butter. So we're holding on to the hope that what we're seeing on the streets at the moment is not representative of Australia.
I hold up that hope too. I don't think it's representative of Australia. I think most Australians are reasonable. We saw that with the Voice vote last year. Most of them actually are reasonable, and I don't think most of us would truck with that kind of horrible stuff, shall we say. David Adler, Dr. David Adler, it is so fantastic to have you on the show. All the very best. Thank you for all the work you do, and we will certainly speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Daisy.
Well, that's all we have time for this evening on the Daisy Cousins Show, and it is my penultimate show for the year. I do hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed presenting it. Thank you to my terrific guests and to all the equally terrific people behind the scenes who make the show possible. Coming up next is Chris Smith Tonight. Good night, world. I will see you tomorrow.